How much of a role do genetics play when it comes to building an amazing physique? Well, let me spoil it for you. A lot more than you think. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how genetics influence everything, from your structure, muscle shape, overall synergy, training response, total muscle growth, recovery, and a whole lot more with tons of examples along the way. But here's the thing, most people think that they don't have good genetics, and that could be a huge mental block. I'm here to show you that no matter what your genetic starting point is, you can still make incredible progress, and so by the end, you're going to feel more motivated than ever to maximize your results and build your best physique regardless of what hand you were dealt. Let's start with anatomy and bone structure. So your bone structure, hips, clavicles, overall bone length and width, is something you can't change of course, but it does set the framework for how your overall physique may look. For example, I have moderate clavicle width, but a wider waist, so to try to build a V-taper look, which is desirable as a guy, I had to be a lot more strategic and work hard at it, so focusing on widening my back and building my delts to create the illusion of a broader upper body and smaller waist. But take guys like Jeff Seid or David Lade, who have genetically very wide clavicles and narrow hips, and this naturally gives them an aesthetic V-taper without having to build a ton of muscle, though they still did. However, structure isn't everything. Laura Lee Chapados, the bikini division Miss Olympia, has narrow hips. Now for women, especially in such a division, lower body is emphasized, and so wider hips typically lend to more aesthetic lower bodies. But she built a world-class physique with appropriate muscular development in the right areas, getting lean enough, and a few of the other things that we're going to talk about later. Bone structure is only one component to this whole genetic equation, but it's often considered to be the only one or the most important one, which is not true at all, as we'll soon see. Now, where muscles insert and originate on the bone structure is another key element. I personally know guys with crazy bone structure, but flat-looking muscle bellies and poor insertions. Typically, short tendon length and lower muscle insertions give the muscle more potential for size and shape. Guys like Robbie Robinson had long bicep insertions and short tendon lengths that made their arms look full and round. Compare that to Chris Bumstead, who has shorter bicep insertions, which really reduces the impact of how good his arms could actually look, especially at the elite level. Now, the best example of this though is the calf muscle. Most people that struggle to grow decent calves have super long gastroc tendons and high insertions. People with naturally big calves that can grow to look sick have very low calf insertions, often below halfway down their shin. Glute shape has a lot to do with insertions and muscle bellies as well. Marissa Franklin, an IFBB bikini competitor, has crazy glute development and is an example of how favorable insertions can create a more aesthetic look. But the muscle belly itself matters too, so how the muscle fibers actually pull up and the shape of the muscle is a genetic component, which is why some women have wide hips. They have decent glute insertions, but the muscle belly of the glute just doesn't quite look as good. Now, an easy example of muscle bellies is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Now, his famous bicep shot is with his right bicep muscle, which has to be one of the most insane muscle bellies of all time for this group. Funny enough, his left arm wasn't nearly as impressive. The muscle belly just didn't contract and appear the same way. Now, he does also happen to have the best chest genetics probably in the history of all physiques ever, which is no surprise considering his chest took up, half of his torso, which means crazy muscle insertions and bellies. Now, in my own case, my arms just don't have great muscle bellies or insertions, but my quads and glutes are overpowered and my calves did not get completely nerfed. So we all have some muscle groups that are better than others because remember, there is no such thing as a perfect physique. Body fat distribution is also largely genetic. Some people easily put on or hold extra fat in some areas, and other people who hold it in somewhere else will wish that they had the first person's physique instead. Now, it usually seems like the woman who has the small waist, big lower body development, wishes their legs were just a little bit smaller or leaner, while the woman next to them that has smaller legs, more defined looking legs, and maybe a smaller frame overall, but an amazing upper body wishes they had the first girl's physiques. Now, to show just how big of a difference genetic fat distribution can make, take Matt Ogus. Even at peak bulk, it seems as though he stores almost no fat in his abdomen. I personally also don't hold much fat in my own midsection and can have abs still poking out at 20% body fat or higher. Keep in mind though, fat distribution, while it is highly genetic, everybody can get to low levels of body fat that will eventually lean out all areas of your physique. The last thing we need from this video is people now having an excuse for why my stomach just doesn't get leaner than this. No, you're probably just fatter than you think you are in general. Genetics or not, getting leaner will probably solve that. And it's also worth mentioning muscle fiber types. We have type 1 slow twitch fibers, which are better for endurance, and type 2 fast twitch fibers, which are better for strength and power. These are genetically different and affect how you respond to certain trainings. As a result, every person's strength potential is different. Some will be able to bench press 450 pounds naturally, yes, naturally, like Russell Orhe, for example, and others will have to grind all their lives just to get maybe 315 pounds. That's just how the chip falls sometimes. Now, while it's basically impossible to change genetic structure, what you can do is grow the muscle on top of it, which always improves the physique. But understanding your response to training and how genetics play into that will be crucial as well. So let's move on to that next, which is training response and muscle leverages. Your structure obviously impacts body leverages to start, okay? Your leverages affect how strong you can be in certain lifts. For instance, short arms and a thick chest will naturally lead to a powerhouse bench press, while long arms and a short torso might excel in deadlifting but be terrible for squatting. Personally, that's what I'm built for, deadlifting, and I've pulled 6 plates on the channel without caring about my deadlift at all. But this highlights the importance of recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses. But on that note, your technique also needs to match your leverages. If you watch a tutorial video on how to chest press, but the person showing you is using leverages that work best to stimulate their chest, and then trying to follow them, it doesn't really work for your leverages, that's a problem. This is why form is so individualized, and also why mind-muscle connection actually does play a role. You need to experiment with and optimize your technique over time on lifts that you just don't seem to be responding well to, or you might just have to ditch them altogether eventually. For some people, the barbell bench press is the superior movement over the chest press machine that they have access to, and it's for these genetic reasons, and most of these science-based lifters that tell you externally stabilized movements are always better regardless of anything else have very little understanding of nuance. What about your genetic potential for total muscle mass that can be built? Some people can naturally pack on 60 pounds of muscle, while others can only pack on 30. These extremes lead to situations where most natural lifters will look at genetic outliers and swear that they're on steroids because it would be impossible otherwise, right? Well, you just simply haven't seen genetic anomalies yet. They exist, and they are freaks. Look at Ronnie Coleman before steroids, Lee Priest at 13, or Russell Orhey like I mentioned before. Average genetics refuse to believe that these people can look like this naturally, but they can, and they do. But then there's somebody like Dr. Eric Helms, a natural pro bodybuilder that I've always drawn inspiration from. He doesn't necessarily have the genetics for crazy muscle growth at all, but he's achieved an elite professional caliber natural physique because he learned to maximize his own genetics in many ways, which is usually good enough. Jeffrey Verity Schofield is an example of a natural lifter as well, that I also draw inspiration from, who probably has genetics to build more mass than the average, but the thing is, while many might have similar genetics, he's taken 10 years of hard training, proper nutrition to get to the point where he now appears to have these sort of elite genetics. But again, those two factors I just mentioned, coupled with never quitting and an absolute passion for the endeavor, could be enough for many to get to that point. There is also a component to this that has to do with how much volume people respond to. Yes, it varies, and yes, this is why the volume debates are often very dumb. Some people need higher volumes to grow, others may grow better or can only tolerate lower volumes. The only way to find this out is through experimentation and data collection, and continuously optimizing over time. Some muscle groups may need higher volumes than others as well. For example, my lower body needs much less volume than my upper body to grow at the same or even still a faster rate. Bring out all of the studies you want, this is how it works for many. Data will not explain this away. Injuries are another area where genetics play a big role. Some people can lift insane weights for years without getting injured much, while others seem to pull a muscle just by looking at a barbell. Connective tissue strength and joint integrity, and again, leverages vary from person to person. This explains why somebody like Larry Wheels could push his body to extreme limits on top of clearly having genetics for strength as well, while others that lift with him in the same session often get injured by doing even just half the weight he's doing. Now let's talk about other key genetic factors. You see, when we think about genetics and fitness, most people focus on muscle shape, strength, fat distribution, that's about it. But there's a whole range of miscellaneous genetic factors that can make or break your progress as well. Factors that don't get enough attention but still play a massive role in how well you perform, recover, and even stay consistent. Your immune system, for example, is something that most people overlook entirely. I'm personally lucky. I rarely get sick, which means I can train consistently throughout the year without having to take long breaks. But I've had clients and friends who seem to get sick every few months, and that really holds them back, because if you're somebody who falls ill often, it can affect your progress in ways you might not realize. Every single week or two that you're missing of training, you're losing momentum. So for those people out there, maintaining a strong immune system is critical for staying on track. Another key genetic factor is how your body reacts when you take time off from training. Some people seem to keep their gains for several weeks, while others, myself included, lose muscle fairly quickly if I stop training. And if you're somebody who shrinks fast, it's all the more important that you stay consistent with your training. You just have to know your body and plan accordingly for those scenarios. Then there's stress tolerance, which of course varies widely from person to person. Stress impacts recovery, sleep, overall ability to perform in the gym. And some people can handle intense stress without any noticeable dip in their training performance, while others crumble under just the slightest bit of pressure. If you're someone who doesn't tolerate stress all that well, learning how to manage it becomes critical to your progress. Sleep is another huge factor, as we know, and yes, some people can get away with minimal sleep for longer than others. Maybe they're getting away with 5 to 6 hours for a long period of time, whereas others need 8 to 9 hours just to function normally. They would do better off more, of course, but it's just to illustrate the difference here as well. Some people recover faster from training than others either way. And if you're somebody who needs more sleep or smarter programming to prioritize recovery, then do it because, of course, recovery is key. Hunger tolerance is another thing that's often overlooked, especially when cutting down to very low body fat levels. Some people can diet down to sub 10% body fat and not feel too hungry without the best nutrition composition, while others feel like they're starving well before they hit this point. Hunger tolerance can be quite genetic. If you're someone who struggles with hunger during these cuts, it's going to make a lot more sense to be smarter with your nutrition composition, your meal timing, your eating window, and so forth. You're going to have to put in more effort and take a more strategic approach. I mean, different people even respond to completely different macronutrient profiles. Do you see just how nuanced this discussion is when it comes to fitness and physique? And this brings me to the biggest and most misunderstood factors in genetics: hyper-responding and non-responding. This concept applies to training, supplements, and everything else, drugs, steroids, right? Everyone falls somewhere on this spectrum. For example, take creatine. Some people will see insane strength gains and muscle fullness from it, while others take it, don't get much at all from it. The same goes for other things like caffeine. Something as basic as that, some people will get completely wired off 80 milligrams of caffeine, while others need 400, 500 milligrams just to feel anything, and this is not accounting for built-up tolerances. At the end of the day, everyone is a hyper-responder to some things, a normal responder to most things, and a non-responder to other things. The key is figuring out which category you fall into for the things that matter most for your fitness journey. Some people might have terrible training genetics but respond well to supplements or better to certain nutrition tactics. Others might have amazing training genetics but a weak immune system. It's all about learning what works best for you. So what do we make of all of this? It almost seems like genetics will dictate how it all goes and it's kind of all just luck from there, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Genetics are the blueprint, but your lifestyle, habits, and programming pull the trigger to how they're going to unfold. And the truth is, you don't actually know what sort of genetics you really have until you spend years implementing all of these things. As you progress in your training, you'll get more dialed in with what works for you. And so new studies will matter less because you learn how your body responds to core principles: training hard, eating well, being consistent. You're going to understand better which muscle groups are genetic strengths over time, what each muscle group responds to volume and programming wise. And after going through a few cuts and bulks, you'll better learn how to dial in your nutrition in a way that works better for you as well. You'll learn your hunger and fatigue tolerances. You'll learn how to spot them faster and fix them. You'll understand better how to execute movements to get the most stimulus out of them for the least amount of fatigue. You'll learn rep ranges that work better for you over time depending on the muscle group, as well as rest times and all the rest. You'll dial in a schedule and training times that lend to better adherence. Of course, the sooner you can start on the basic fundamentals that will never change regardless of genetics, things like tracking properly, consistency across your lifestyle, proper training principles, and nutritional manipulation, the sooner you'll be able to get to a point where you can actually maximize your results and master your genetics. And this is why I provide the Modern Physique membership to help you do exactly that in record time. The link is in the description to join up. Now, we can all accentuate our genetic strengths and weaknesses in all types of ways. This also includes finding the right styles and fits tailored to your physique's strengths. Finding what sort of poses in photo shoot pictures are your strengths, just like the best fitness influencers do. Check out Caroline here, showing a good example of this. So why would you not do the things that accentuate your God-given strengths and what you've helped build on top of them with hard work any way that you can, while still, of course, always working on the weaknesses? I started with decent genetics, but I had key weaknesses I needed to address. Now, after tailoring training, posing, even clothing choices, people sometimes will come and tell me I'm lucky that I have great genetics or their dream body. And I just say this to remind you that no matter what you think about your own genetics, you can't change them, but you can do great things with them. Comparing yourselves to others is fine for inspiration, but wishing you had better or different genetics is unproductive. It's not about the hand you're dealt, it's about how you play that hand. This is life. Some people will be more charismatic, some will be better at influencing, some will be better at making friends, some will be smarter at math, some will be excellent writers, someone might have a beautiful physique that they seemingly work half as hard as you did. You're over here being all meticulous with it, but that doesn't mean that their competency in life and relationships or anything else is something that you'd want to trade it for. But regardless of this, there are introverts who decided they wanted lots of friends. There are shy people that decided they wanted to speak on stages. There are weak people that decided they wanted to be strong. There are mediocre people that decided they wanted to be great, and they all can achieve it, as can you. Master your genetic strengths, work on your weaknesses, never use them as an excuse, and build your best physique so it can fuel you to become the best version of yourself in every endeavor. In other words, focus on what you can improve, be grateful for what you have, and let's strap in because for those of you who do, I'll be seeing you at the top.